The bar throbbed with life that night, alive with the sound of guitars screaming from a battered jukebox and the clamor of men who had long forgotten the taste of quiet. Bottles clinked, heavy boots stamped the cracked floorboards, and cigarette smoke curled through the air like restless spirits. It was the kind of place where danger breathed in every corner, and respect was earned through scars, not words. At a corner table sat a woman, alone, wrapped in a fitted leather jacket that seemed deliberately plain compared to the studded vests and patched coats of the men around her. She had been there for only 20 minutes, quietly sipping from a glass of whiskey that hadn't been touched again after the first swallow. Her gaze was calm, steady, watching the storm of laughter and violence swirl around her as if she had already seen it all before. That composure, however, was exactly what made her stand out. In a place where braggadocio and noise were the only currencies, her silence was a challenge. And in the world of bikers, a challenge could not go unanswered. From the far end of the bar, a man named Kane noticed her. Kane was a mountain of a biker, his beard coarse and his jacket plastered with patches from countless rides and battles. He was used to being the loudest in the room, the man others stepped aside for, the one whose fist could silence an argument faster than any bullet. To him, the woman's stillness wasn't strength, it was mockery. "Look at her," he growled to his companions, slamming his glass down hard enough to splash beer across the counter. "Sits there like she owns the place. Like she's too good for us." A few of the men laughed, some sneered, but all of them turned to look. The woman didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge their stares. She merely shifted her glass slightly, as though she was adjusting for space, and went back to her quiet. That tiny dismissal cut deeper than a knife. Fueled by pride and drink, Kane stood. His heavy boots hit the floor with deliberate force, and the crowd parted instinctively. He walked toward her, his shadow stretching long in the dim, flickering lights. The woman glanced at him once, her expression unreadable, and then returned her gaze to the glass before her. That simple act was gasoline to his fire. He stopped just short of her table, towering over her, waiting for the tension to bite. "You think you're too good to look at me?" Kane sneered, his voice rough like gravel grinding against steel. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than his rage. The room buzzed with energy now. Conversations stopped. Cigarettes smoldered unnoticed in ashtrays. All eyes were on the woman and the giant who confronted her. Someone whispered, "She's dead," while another muttered, "Finally, something worth watching." Kane slammed his hand down on the table, rattling her untouched whiskey. "I'm talking to you," he barked. "You sit in my bar, you give me respect. You hear me?" The woman slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes met his, calm and steady, a quiet storm hidden in the depths. "Respect," she said finally, her voice low and measured, "is not given. It's earned." The words sliced through the air like a blade. A few of the men whistled, others laughed nervously, but Kane's face twisted into something between fury and disbelief. "You literally," he grabbed the collar of her jacket, yanking her halfway out of her chair. His other hand clenched, ready to strike, when he suddenly froze. His eyes darted to the edge of her collar wearing peeked out intricate, dark lines just visible against her skin. He frowned. "What's that?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Then, with a roar meant to mask his hesitation, Kane hooked his fingers into her shirt and ripped it wide open. The sound of tearing fabric thundered louder than the jukebox, louder than the gasps that filled the room. The woman didn't resist. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, her jacket falling away, her shirt shredded to ribbons. And then the room went silent. From her collarbone down across her chest and arms ran an unbroken tapestry of tattoos, not the casual ink of barroom rebels but symbols older, sharper, etched with precision and weight. The designs curved like ancient runes, spiraling into patterns that seemed to move under the dim light, alive with their own energy. The longer one stared, the more they swore the symbols glowed faintly, pulsing like fiends carrying light instead of blood. The crowd's smirks died instantly. A few men instinctively stepped back, as if distance could shield them from what they now saw. The air shifted, no longer just heavy with smoke, but thick with something else, something unexplainable, something powerful. Kane staggered backward a step, his face pale despite the red fury that had burned there moments before. He knew those marks. Everyone did, and whispers and legends passed around late at night when the fire burned low and even the strongest man felt the weight of the dark. He dropped her collar as if it had seared his hand. The woman said nothing, only adjusted the torn remnants of her shirt with deliberate slowness. Her eyes, still calm, locked onto his. Kane's breath quickened, his throat dry. And then his knees buckled. With a loud thud, the great biker dropped before her, the floor shaking under his weight. He didn't look like a king of the bar anymore. He looked like a boy who had just seen a ghost, or perhaps a queen before whom no crown could stand. The bar was silent now. Not a cough, not a shuffle of boots. Just silence and the echo of the truth in those tattoos. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence in the bar was suffocating, pressing down on every chest as though the air itself demanded reverence. Kane, the man who had once been the loudest and fiercest, remained on his knees, his massive shoulders trembling. He kept his eyes lowered, as though to meet hers again would be an act of blasphemy. The woman let the silence linger. She didn't rush to fill it with words or gestures. She simply stood there, torn shirt falling away from her shoulders, tattoos glowing faintly like embers in the dark. She wanted them all to feel the weight of the moment, and they did. Every man in that room, whether drunk, proud, or reckless, felt the truth that pulsed in her skin. One of the younger bikers, too naive to understand but too proud to remain still, finally spoke. "What the hell are those?" His voice cracked in the middle, betraying his fear. The woman turned her head slowly, her gaze cutting through the haze of smoke and whiskey. Her eyes found the boy, and though her face remained calm, he swallowed hard and lowered his stare to the floor. He didn't ask again. The tattoos weren't merely ink, they were marks of belonging, of initiation, of authority. They told stories older than the bar, older than the men gathered in it. Each curve and line was a symbol of battles fought and won, of legacies preserved in blood and fire. Among the biker world, whispers spoke of a hidden order, a lineage that bound certain families to codes no one dared challenge. To bear those marks openly was to declare oneself untouchable, and now that legacy stood before them in the flesh. Kane finally lifted his head, his face drenched in sweat, his mouth opened, but words refused to come out. He was choking on a mix of fear and recognition. He had heard of this before, and campfires by the roadside, in prison yards where tails carried more weight than steel bars, but he never thought he'd see it. Not here, not like this. You a broken bar. His voice was hoarse, almost pleading. You're one of them. The woman tilted her head slightly, a shadow of a smile brushing her lips. Now you understand. The room seemed to exhale at once. The bikers glanced at each other, eyes wide, unease etched into their rough faces. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others clenched their fists as though trying to anchor themselves. But no one laughed, no one jeered. The balance of power had shifted in a single heartbeat, and they all felt it. One man at the bar tried to stand tall, desperate to reclaim control. So what? He barked, though his voice lacked conviction. She's just a woman, Inc. Don't make you a. He didn't finish. The woman raised her hand, and in the dim light, the tattoos flared as though awakened by her movement. The glow was faint but undeniable, sending shivers down every spine in the room. The man froze, his bravado dissolving instantly. He lowered his gaze, muttering something to himself as he backed away. The crowd parted, instinctively giving her space. She stood in the center of the room now, every eye fixed on her, every heart beating just a little too fast. Kane was still on his knees, his hands, those fists that had once broken bones without hesitation, now pressed against the floorboards as if he were bowing before a shrine. His voice trembled when he finally spoke again. Forgive me. The words sounded strange in his mouth. This was not a man who begged, nor one who admitted fault, yet here he was, humbled, reduced. The woman studied him for a moment, then spoke, her voice calm but edged with iron. Forgiveness is earned, Kane, not begged for. You knew nothing of me, yet you chose violence. That choice has consequences. Her words slashed deeper than any blade. Kane's head bowed lower, his forehead nearly touching the ground. Around them, the other bikers shifted uneasily, not out of loyalty to him but out of fear for themselves. If their leader could be brought to his knees so effortlessly, what chance did they have? The jukebox sputtered as though protesting the silence, then fell quiet again. The bar felt like a temple now, a place where something larger than all of them had descended. The woman pulled her jacket back around her shoulders, covering the marks but not erasing the memory of them. She looked around the room slowly, her gaze brushing over each man like a test. One by one, they dropped their eyes, unable to hold her stare. You will remember this night, she said softly, but her voice carried to every corner of the bar. You will remember the woman you tried to break, and you will remember what you saw instead. Her words etched themselves into the smoke-filled air, impossible to forget. With deliberate steps, she turned and walked toward the door. No one moved to stop her. The crowd parted in silence, their faces pale and their bodies tense, as though afraid that even brushing against her might burn. The wooden door creaked open, spilling cold night air into the bar, and then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness outside. For a long moment, no one breathed. Finally, one of Kane's lieutenants broke the silence. He leaned toward his leader, still on his knees, and whispered, "What do we do now?" Kane lifted his head slowly. His eyes were hollow, haunted, as though he had glimpsed something he could never unsee. "We remember," he rasped, "and we never cross her path again." The bar murmured an uneasy agreement. Glasses sat untouched, cigarettes burned to ash, and the men who had once thought themselves kings of the night now felt like children who had trespassed in a world they didn't understand. Outside, the sound of a motorcycle engine roared to life. Its growl echoed through the night, fading into the distance. Inside, the silence remained heavy, a constant reminder that power wasn't measured in fists or in fear, but in the weight of legacy and in the ink of a woman who had just rewritten their world.